Hey everyone, Jen here, and today we are trying something new. I'm going to be using my light box to do our video. Hopefully you will be able to see the project better. If you could give me some feedback in the comments after and let me know whether or not you prefer this over my cutting mat or what have you. So the only thing with this, it is a little harder to show if I'm ironing and such. So this particular project, we're not going to iron in the hoop, so I was hoping it would be a little bit easier. So today we're going to be making the flag quilt in the hoop quilt block. So if you've made any of our other quilt blocks, it's a very similar process. It's just going through which steps come first in the layout. This block you can make very quickly. So in my inspiration project, I made a 9-block 26 by 26 floor pillow, and I made 9 blocks in about 2.5 hours. So if you pre-cut all of your fabrics, which I'm showing here, and get into like an assembly line, they go very, very, very quickly. So what I want you to do is start with pre-cutting your fabric. So you're going to need the corner of the flag blue, you'll need red and white strips, and then whatever your background color is going to be for the outside frame, which I'm using white. Now, what you will have to decide, the flag is not to scale to like a normal flag. So you're going to have to decide whether or not you are going to start with red or you're going to start with white. And I'll show you what I mean when we get the pieces laid out. So if you follow the cut chart, you should have minimal trimming in the hoop. So I've already pre-cut my longer strips, my shorter strips for the top of the flag square, and my background. So let's get stitching. Okay, because this is YouTube and they like horizontal videos, the flag will open vertically just like this, but for the video, we're going to do it horizontal. So I went ahead and ran the placement line in black. You definitely don't want to do that when you make your own. I suggest, a lighter color, white, gray, light gray. So, and I also ran this on a different tearaway than I recommend. So because this actually shows up better for videos so you can see the project, I use Tear Easy by Sulky for all of the quilt blocks. It will be linked below. It's in the tutorial, like the PDF cut chart, stuff like that. That is what I recommend for these blocks. So step 1, you're going to run your full placement directly on your stabilizer. There's no batting. And the first block that's going to go down is going to be the top part of your flag. So this is where, again, you're going to decide, am I going to start with red or am I going to start with white? So I prefer to start with white because I want the strip that is under the blue to be red. I just think that looks better and more in line with our flag. So that would mean you would need to start with white. So if you laid it out, you would go white, red, white, red, white, red. So if you don't like that, then you can switch and start with red, white. I don't have another red cut, red, and then this strip would be white. So make that decision first. So I'm going to start with white, and the first block is going to go down flat, and that's going to be this block right here, the first strip. So you're going to line up your piece. You want to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and if you follow the cut chart, you should have roughly a little over a 1/4 inch on either side, which is good, which means you do not have to trim anything. So lay your first piece flat and run step 2 to tack it into place. Okay, so our first piece is in place, and if you see, we have a nice seam allowance. This side, just leave until we're all done, and then we'll trim those. So the next piece to go in place is the red stripe, and you're going to place it right side down, and if you line it up with the corner of your other strip, you will not have to trim it. So that's why if you follow the cut chart, this will make your life a lot easier. So line it up with the other corner. It's going to stitch along the cross across the top here, and then we're going to flip it over. All right, so I marked it with my marking pen so you can see the stitching a little bit easier. So it's stitched across the top. Then you're going to take your piece of fabric and you are going to fold it over just like that. And you can hold it or you can tape it to the bottom. And what it's going to do is it's going to complete the stitching around the outside to tack it into place. Okay, so our second strip is tacked into place around the bottom here. So the next strip is going to be the next white strip. So you're going to repeat the same process, right side down, line your corner up with your other piece and stitch along the bottom there. Okay, so the stitching's complete here. We're going to repeat the process, flip over your white, tack it down, and then run the outside stitching here. If you've noticed, this is a repeated process. That's because all the pieces are going to be the same. It's just which order are you going to do them in. So I'm going to run that step, and then we're going to move on to the star blue spot. Okay, so our top 3 strips, they're all done. So we're moving on to our blue square. And the blue square is going to go right side down. And if you line it up with the edge of your fabrics, again, you don't have to trim. The seam allowance is all the same, which is a win. So now the stitching is going to go vertically down the side, and then we're going to flip the square over and complete the outside stitching, which I'm going to do both at the same time. All right, so our blue square is complete. So now we're going to move on to the bottom 3 stripes. And the first stripe, because we started with white, is now going to be red. So we're going to lay our red fabric right side down and line it up with the bottom of those other fabrics so we don't have to trim. We're going to run our initial step and then flip it over and complete the tack down. Okay, so first red stripe down. You can see the process is the same. So now I'm going to repeat it for the next 2 strips so we can speed it up. Again, if you cut to the cut chart, this one might be a little bit long, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. Once I have these 2 complete, we'll trim up the sides before we attach the white. If you're using a darker color on the border, then, it's not as serious. But I will say I've used white in my project, and the white I chose did show some stuff underneath. So just be mindful of the, the accent or the background color that you pick if the white is thick enough to hide some of your other fabrics. So I'm going to go ahead and do the next 2 stripes the exact same way. All right, so all of our stripes are complete. So at this point, you are going to want to trim up the sides here along the side. And this, while I think it's fine, I would normally leave this, but I am using white and this is red, and it's definitely going to show through my fabric choice. So I'm going to trim this down, not too short, but less than 1/4 of an inch, and hopefully my other seam allowance will cover and not show through. We'll see. So go ahead and trim your sides up. It's a little downfall of the light box, but so trim all at the same time. For reference, we are using the 5x5 quilt block. And then this should be fine. I'll just trim this down just a tiny bit so it's in line with the blue. Okay. All right, so the last 4 strips are going to be your border. So I'm using white for the video. Again, if you want to use something, a light blue might be another option. I would definitely use a solid or like a tone-on-tone color because once you have it together, that's what really will make your flag stand out if you are putting these together with other blocks. So if you use like another red or even a darker blue, it might blend a little too much. So the first strip that is going to go is the left side. So it's going to go left, right, I believe bottom, top. So I go ahead and just lay both my sides at the same time. You're going to line it up with the edge of your fabric on both sides. And you're going to run your vertical line and then flip it over just like the stripe fabric and complete the tack down around the outside. then it's going to go down vertically on here, and you're going to repeat the process. So I'm going to do this side and this side at the same time. Okay, so both sides are done. You're going to want to trim the top and the bottom excess here. Leave the outside seam allowance because you're going to need that to trim down to the quilt block size. So don't cut that off. Bigger is better on the outside. Okay, so trim those to line up with your other fabrics. Then we're going to do the final two, the top and the bottom. Again, I believe the bottom goes first, but I lay both fabrics at the same time. I mean, you're going to be on the hoop, so why not? Let's go ahead and lay those. And it's going to run your, again, your horizontal line, flip it over, complete the tack down, horizontal line, and then flip it over, complete your tack down. Okay, stitching is now complete. And you can even see through just the light, the black stitching of the placement line does show up. So that's what I mean. When you're making yours, use a, if you're using white, definitely use white thread because some of that placement stitching, a lot of the placement stitching stays in your project. So just be mindful of that. So when you're done with your block, I want you to go ahead and remove it from the stabilizer. However, I do not want you to pull out any of the stabilizer on the interior of the quilt block. You want to leave that in. That's going to help keep your quilt block stable for you to use on your project. So we're just going to take off, and tear easy, I'm telling you, is so much, it just comes out. This, not that this is bad, but tear easy will come out of your interior of your quilt blocks like a dream. So invest in some tear easy. You can just get like a small roll on Amazon and try it. And then I will tell you, I buy it by the bolt directly from Sulky, and it's a much better price that way. I don't think you can really find it by the bolt in like stores. So, okay, so leave your stabilizer on the inside of your block. Again, if this was traditional paper piecing, you leave the paper in the block. So when you connect your blocks, the paper keeps this, excuse me, nice and stable so it doesn't stretch your block. So you can connect them really easy, and it's a lot easier to get them straight. So I'm going to take this off camera, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So using your outer stitch line, you're going to take your ruler and you're going to line up the 1/4 inch on top of your stitch line and trim to give yourself a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the entire outside of your block. Okay, so here's the trimmed block. You can see here's my 1/4 inch seam, and here's my tack down line all around the outside. So what's going to happen is if you decide to make this into a pillow, a table runner, a placemat, whatever, and if you're going to join more than one block, when you join a second block, you're going to have a nice wide background between the blocks. So that's where picking the outer fabric or the background fabric matters, like, because it is very noticeable because it will be so thick in between your projects. So what's also nice though is you don't really need to add sashing unless you want to make your project larger and you're limited by your hoop size. So again, this is a 5x5 block. When you add the seam allowance, that gives you 5.5. So your finished block, if you connect them, will still be 5. When you connect them, you're going to, flip your other quilt block on top and use your placement or your tack down line as your guide to stitch on. So if you match up your tack down lines on both pieces and sew right along top, you'll have a nice straight seam to follow. So if you only have a 5x5 hoop, if you wanted to make, say, a 16-inch pillow or an 18-inch pillow, 4 5x5 quilt blocks is only going to give you a 10-inch pillow. So you would need to add a border to make it the size, to make up the size for the pillow form. So again, if you're doing 16-inch would probably be easiest. So if you have a 16-inch pillow form and 4 5x5 blocks, you would add roughly 3.5 inches around the outside of your block. So you would just divide that by 2, and that would be your border size. And you could round up a little. I certainly do to make the math easier, because when you wash these after you quilt them, they shrink. So unless you're a pre-fabric washer, which I am not, I like the crinkled, shrunk look on all my stuff. It's going to shrink a little. So give yourself some grace. And if you go up a little bit to make it easier math-wise, then go for it. So I'll be sharing my pillow. It'll be on Facebook. Obviously, it will be in the listing. The gals used this block in a lot of different ways. So I hope you enjoy these blocks. And if you would like to leave me any feedback in the comments, that would be great. Thank you.